I'm Ashton Addison from EventChain for Investment Pitch Media and the Crypto Coin Show. And today on Blockchain Interviews, we have Gaurav Dahake, the CEO of BitBNS. Welcome to the show, Gaurav. It's a pleasure to have you here today.
Same here. Thanks a lot for having me over, Ashton.
I'm really excited for our discussion today. If you could just kick it off with briefly explain how you got into Bitcoin and blockchain and then how that led to you starting the BitBNS exchange.
Right. So my first brush with Bitcoin happened back in the final year of my college. So this was 2012. And we at that point in time, Bitcoin price started rising, and we started kind of learning more about the technology. We being engineers, we figured out that we probably should kind of try mining it on a computer, and none of us had a sophisticated computer. So we pulled in money and we kind of procured parts from Amazon in the US, got them to India, assembled the PC, and started mining. And we did mine a few Satoshis, but then the difficulty bomb kind of kicked in, and the difficulty became much higher, and it was not mining. So we started playing FIFA on that computer, but that was that brush. Then we kind of started working after our college, and the second brush kind of came in 2017 when everything was kind of going into Bitcoin and crypto, and that's when we decided, ki, hey, we can kind of possibly do something here. And when we saw that there was a lack of credible exchanges from India, and there was a lot of issues in terms of onboarding users and all. So we decided to kind of start across an exchange, and we started on Christmas Eve 2017, and since then have kind of continued the course, and has been kind of pretty amazing journey.
Very cool backstory, Gaurav. And yeah, I can imagine getting a few Satoshis and then coming back 5 years later and being like, oh man, we were so close to mining all the Bitcoin. But hey, it was still so early in the industry. And now with you starting the BitBNS cryptocurrency exchange in India, they still have a second chance to get involved and make a difference in this industry. So with that, could you give just an overview of exactly how BitBNS works? What are your current team's goals?
Right. Sure. So we're currently one of the largest exchanges from India. On a daily basis, we're kind of trading about $20 million with respect to fiat and crypto pairs, predominantly a fiat exchange. So people can onboard via fiat and then trade any digital asset. 100 plus assets are there which people can trade. We have margin trading with leverage, so people can trade leverage on the platform. We also have derivatives that has kind of come in, so we also have options where people can trade options. And not just that, we've kind of built pretty interesting stuff over time. So what we've done is we kind of understood that if we kind of classify users overall, the investor class of users was missing from crypto. It came in 2017. A lot of them burned their hands in ICOs and other things. And then they kind of vanished for the last 2 years, 18, 19, early 2020. Now, when there is a lot of, again, we are kind of closing towards all-time highs and all, then some of the investor classes coming back. And we built a very interesting tool for that. It's called BitDroplet. So apart from the exchange side of it, so the exchange is for traders, where we kind of make sophisticated instruments like the spot trading is there. Then you have margin trading with leverage. Then you have options, derivatives, and other things. We also have something called as BitDroplet, which is a straightforward Bitcoin DCA tool. So we launched it last year. We were one of the first ones globally to kind of launch a straightforward Bitcoin SIP tool. SIP is systematic investment into Bitcoin, and what has happened over time is Bitcoin. It's very hard to time Bitcoin
Mm-hmm.
because the price changes are very, very crazy, right? So you go from a $200 to a $20,000, and from 20,000 you get back to 3,000, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's when we kind of figure out like how do we kind of give or explain people ki how should you kind of take exposure into Bitcoin. And that's when we figured out like a dollar cost averaging is the best way to kind
Mm-hmm.
of do it, and we made a tool for that. It's called BitDroplet,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of users are actively kind of using that tool. So if you kind of most exchanges globally are focused on just kind of the trading side of users, we as a whole want to kind of grow that ecosystem and also want to ensure we bring in new set of users who do want to get into crypto, but
Mm-hmm.
trading is not very native for them to kind of get an exposure.
Mm-hmm. Definitely, that's really interesting, and some great statistics that you mentioned there about 20 million in volume, being one of the largest exchanges, having all the necessary financial tools for people to be able to trade. But the bit droplet seems like, and this was going to be my next question, something unique and a competitive advantage for the exchange, to have that dollar cost averaging, or to have that fiat on and off ramp where you can easily have reoccurring purchases or get more exposure to the asset in an exchange is, it seems like a great competitive advantage. Now, do you see that as one of your main competitive advantages? And also, is that translating to a synergistic growth between people using that platform and also people reoccurring purchases now using BitBNS for trading?
Right. So there is definitely a certain overlap, but I would say BitDroplet is more towards investing sort of users. Like
Mm-hmm.
there are two classes of users. One is the active traders who want to kind of get into a position, close that position within say a day or a few hours or say a quarter or say a week. But investors are usually longer term, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's when we want to kind of create that ecosystem that if you want to take a longer term exposure, dollar cost averaging has been the best sort of way to kind of get into Bitcoin, and
Mm-hmm.
it has usually outperformed any other asset class. So dollar cost averaging sort of into Bitcoin has always given greater than 25% returns annualized. Of even if you started investing at the peak of Bitcoin, like if you
Mm-hmm.
invested when it was $19,000 in 2017 and started
Mm-hmm.
dollar cost averaging, you would have gotten you would be up 80% over the last 3 years. So when that sort of a thing is there, we want to kind of educate more people into that, and that overall makes the ecosystem stronger, right?
Mm-hmm.
So traders are one aspect of it, and they are very, very important. But apart from that, if we kind of bring the bystanders who don't know how to kind of get into crypto, and a lot of them did lose significant amount of money in 2017 with the ICO boom, with rising prices and Ethereum being $1,400 and then going to $80 in a span of a year. A lot of people kind of lost money, and that's when we are like, here, how do we tell a new user to get into crypto and do it in a way where he doesn't lose money, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where DCA kind of came into being, and that's something that we are kind of really proud that we've kind of bought this sort of a concept, and we're trying to kind of take it to the next level, by bringing in about 1 million users over the next 18 months.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's ambitious, and that's great, Gaurav, that you are continuing to expand. And I was researching into BitBNS, and I know you're expanding also in the other way with
Right.
more newer tools and speculative assets and NFTs and DeFi. Can you talk about what BitBNS and your team is doing in terms of moving into the new space and how you're working within the decentralized finance ecosystem?
Right. So we kind of were closely monitoring what was happening in the DeFi space. And overall, one of the goals with crypto is that over a period of time, the prominence or the dominance of centralized entities should kind of go down, right? This was the same problem that banks were kind of having. And if again, large centralized exchange become custodians of different things, that's something that's going to be problematic in the longer run, right? And that's where there are incidents where things can kind of go wrong. Now, when we kind of take that into context, the rise of DeFi and things that are kind of happening there is a very, very promising trend. And I kind of see that over a longer period of time, over say 10, 15 years, I see banks becoming non existent, right?
Mm-hmm.
So DeFi has kind of a lot of things that it's kind of empowering. And if we create a seamless user experience, which to a certain degree is happening with Uniswap, but that's still for the 1% of the users. It's
Mm-hmm.
not for, say, the larger masses. If that becomes more and more seamless over a period of time, we are going to onboard a massive set of users and kind of grow from there, right? Now, when this sort of a thing started happening, right, that's when we kind of figured out like how do we participate into this. Even being a centralized exchange, we need to kind of ensure we need to participate in this. Otherwise, we are going to make ourselves extinct, right? Most of the centralized exchanges kind of started realizing that after seeing the Uniswap volumes and people kind of actively getting into it. Um, even when a lot of the other things were not as seamless, like the fees are really, really high, gas fees and transaction fees on something like a Uniswap, but we saw a lot of kind of transaction volume happening there. Now, when we kind of take that into context, we also saw there were, of course, when there is a lot of user activity on a certain thing, there is also a lot of wrong things that kind of start happening on some certain platforms, right? Now, what we started observing was that with Uniswap, there were issues with something called as rug pulls, right? So there was liquidity kind of getting added for different projects. People got an option to kind of participate in some really, really interesting things. But a lot of people were also losing excessive amount of money where they're participating into projects where there was not a lot of transparency, there was not a lot of due diligence that could have been done, and abruptly team tokens were kind of taking away all the liquidity, and all this sort of issues started happening. Now, when we kind of put that into context, we figured out, okay, hey, we need to figure out a solution. So we kind of started analyzing the entire landscape. One of the landscape part of it was that, hey, one is you have these centralized launchpads like the Binance Launchpad, OKX Jumpstart, and all these sort of platforms, where there is one project that comes in a month or something of that sort, and people kind of then have to do a lot of crazy things just to kind of get a token or a ticket or something of that sort. And that's a lucky draw that kind of happens there, right? And there is still not a lot of voice that users can have, hey, what sort of projects should come, how things should kind of transpire, and all of that. The second aspect and the extreme end of the other aspect is Uniswap, where all crazy type of projects can kind of come, and people also lose a significant amount of money when they participate in something which is not legit or scam, or rug pulls start happening and all. And when we analyze the data, we figured out like 60% of Uniswap projects get rug pulled within 6 hours. That's crazy. Like 6 hours is you won't even complete your sleep, and by the time you've woken up, the month is gone. Right? So,
Yeah.
and that's for 60% of the projects, which is insane, right? So, and that's when we're like, hey, how do we figure out a solution to this, right? And when we started analyzing that, that's when we kind of came up with something called as Ascent. We call it, the website name is launchonascent.com. And essentially, what happens with that is, we kind of bring carefully vetted projects onto the platform. People can also vote and bring certain set of projects that they want to kind of participate, and everything is on chain, so it's entirely decentralized. And people get a part of the money that is being raised on the platform. So, say if a couple of $1 million are getting raised, 3% of that is the fees of the platform, and that is getting redistributed back to users. Now, that's kind of really, really interesting in one sense. Like, if you kind of take, say, IEO platforms and all, they charge a crazy amount of money. Like a Binance Launchpad would charge, say, a couple of $1 million, and then there is the tokens they kind of take and all of that. And again, there is no transparency. Like, you can, like, team can have tokens and they can kind of dump on the masses, and all those sort of things can happen, right? And that's when we kind of build this decentralized on-chain solution. Like, hey, this is a foolproof sort of a way to kind of participate in the best of the projects, and you can have additional features. So you have a feature like vesting. So team tokens would be locked for a period of, say, a year or 2 years or whatever time is decided, and they are released in a monthly fashion, and everything is visible on chain. Like on Etherscan, you can see, hey, boss, the team had 2.4 million tokens, and only 100,000 tokens have gone after the first month, and so on and so forth, right? This is one part of it. Then there are a lot of other things that we kind of built into that how do we kind of give airdrops? How do these teams kind of bootstrap their community? Like, any project needs to kind of have an active community to kind of start working and scaling across from there. And some of these things we kind of kept working on, and we launched it last month in testnet. We saw pretty strong response. We went live with the mainnet, and we kind of concluded the first pre-sale of a project just a couple of days back, and it went really, really well. So we kind of bought a project called Oro Pocket. Oro Pocket is trying to bring the real world assets on chain. So something like a gold or silver, they're kind of bringing all that on chain via synthetics, and people can kind of systematically participate into that. And as I said, we also have a product like an SIP for Bitcoin. We're collaborating with Oro Pocket, and then people can also do an SIP into gold or SIP into real world assets that people want to kind of do. So that's something that we're kind of building. So bring transparency, lower the cost of launching for a project, give them the existing community, and the best of the projects also kind of get listed on BitBNS platform, and all that sort of things are kind of happening.
That's a really interesting expansion, Gaurav. I see where you're heading with this, similar to what Binance has done, where you have that centralized exchange, the foundation, there's a Launchpad, there's a decentralized exchange, you tap into the decentralized finance ecosystem, and now you're helping projects in a more transparent and fair way, the ones that deserve to be able to grow, and not the ones that are, just looking for to exit. So that's great that you are also including that, because it's sort of like the first step, at least for your exchange, to have great trading pairs, and you can get coins that are early, that are actually legitimate coins that actually started on your platform as well. So I really like that. Now we're running out of time, Gaurav, but if the viewers are looking to follow along with the Launchpad, or maybe they have a project, or maybe they're just looking to trade and learn more, what's the best way for them to find out more and join the community?
Right. So they can kind of join us on Telegram, and I'm also fairly active on Telegram. I'm one of the admins on that group, so they can just reach me out from there. And we've been kind of really, really open in terms of kind of inviting in projects, kind of helping them out in terms of how should they kind of strategize their launch and kind of scale it along from there. So essentially, our goal we kind of see is how do we kind of make the ecosystem broader and better. One is kind of bringing the investor class, so BitBNS is around that angle. Then we kind of go towards where crypto's end roots are there, right? Like where we want to decentralize things, and people should hold custody of their things. People should be able to participate in the best of the things that are out there, which was not happening earlier, right? So most of the greatest startups out there in the world, people can't directly participate in that. It's the most like VCs or people who already have a lot of money, they can kind of participate in those sort of things. But that's kind of inverted world, right? Like you are allowed to participate in lottery tickets, and lottery ticket has more sort of spend than movies plus sports and all of that combined. And you can't participate in investing into startups which are legit and all, right? And that's where we are kind of bringing that to the users with governance in place, that hey, you can put things in checks and balances so that things cannot go wrong. Like as in, if you have team tokens lock, advisor tokens lock, and other things, and you have milestone based funding release. That's also something really interesting. We have a lot of teams kind of promise certain things and then they do not kind of execute it. So we have milestone based funding release as well, which teams can kind of do, and that's something that's kind of really exciting. So would love to kind of take this opportunity to invite the best of the projects, and they would also kind of get an access to a really large community that we kind of have over at BitBNS.
That's great, Gaurav. I will leave all of those links in the description box below. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. All the best with BitBNS, the Launchpad, and everything in DeFi going forward. And let's follow up in the near future.
Cool. Thanks, Gail. Thanks a lot, Ashton. Great having over here.